Right, good afternoon. On behalf of IEEFA and my colleague Vibhuti Garg here with me, I would like to today present a new paper that we've written looking at the issue of integrating variable renewable energy and using some case studies from other leading markets like California, Germany and South Australia to illustrate how other markets are dealing with this challenge. I will also put the caveat, I am a finance analyst, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a consultant, so I'll bring a finance perspective, what I'm seeing companies are doing, what I'm seeing markets are doing, as opposed to the science. So in this paper, we've explored how variable renewable energy is being integrated in other key markets, and I think it's important that India as a leading market in incorporating renewable energy draw on those lessons that other countries are doing, because we're all going down roughly the same path, but we have different resources at hand. But overall, there's a massive energy system disruption or transformation absolutely well underway. So in terms of India, my focus on India is to evaluate and the ambition of a target of 523 gigawatts of renewable energy, including hydro, by 2030. That is absolutely world leading, and it's critical for India, but it's also critical for the world, and it's critical for other countries who are going through a similar process, but maybe 5 years behind, to see the success of India. And the core conclusion of our presentation, my presentation now, is that we need a price signal. So very much as per our last speaker, we need the price signal to drive the balancing, on-demand, flexible, peaking power generation. So we need a time of day pricing signal or equivalent product to drive the capital markets to deliver the products and the technologies that entirely exist today. But firstly, some context. Renewable energy, I think everyone in India understands how deflationary renewable energy is. Wind and solar have been on a massive double-digit annual deflationary trend now for 5 or 10 years. Batteries, likewise, are going through the same deflationary process. And it's now, I find, very much an accepted position that variable renewable energy is the low-cost source of new electricity supply in India, significantly cheaper than thermal power. So now it's a matter of how you actually incorporate the intermittency of that power. Now, one point which I'll just reinforce with a couple of examples. I mentioned renewable energy is deflationary. India in 2017 saw a 50% decline in both wind and solar tariffs. But now that renewables are the low cost, that is not the end of the game. Even in the last, I've just picked 3 examples, I've actually got a 4th one, which is Malaysia. But in the last 2 months, we've seen California hit a new record low, 15% lower solar and battery tariffs than a year ago, 15% lower in 1 year. So solar at less than $20 a megawatt hour. We've seen Portugal hit record low tariffs, as low as 15 euros per megawatt hour. We've seen Brazil hit record low tariffs, down 15%. We saw Malaysia last week announce their 3rd tariff awards. They were down 50% on only a year ago, 18 months ago, down to $42 a megawatt hour. Now, 42 is obviously a lot higher than where India is, particularly when you apply the deflationary 25-year nature of the contracts. Zero indexation for 25 years means that the headline price in India is 35 to 40, but the levelized cost of energy is actually below $30. So India has some of the lowest variable renewable energy in the world. It will get cheaper, without doubt, in my mind. The flip side of this is the stranded asset risk globally and in India is rising for both coal-fired power and, as we've seen in India, for gas-fired power. So we need to be aware there is a global trend away from coal. Coal in India will be used for decades to come, I have no doubt about that, but the share will continue to be eroded, and it's worthwhile looking at other markets to avoid some of the lessons, the very expensive financial lessons. Now, part of this is an IEA chart, International Energy Agency chart. I've put it up to highlight that it's both coal and gas that is seeing a dramatic slowdown globally. One of the key drivers of the move away from coal-fired power generation globally is financial markets. We've seen 109 globally significant financial institutions announce coal exit policies. They formally will either restrict or not lend to thermal coal mining or coal-fired power plants on a global basis. It's not a, well, it is a factor in India. We're not seeing coal exclusion, but the banks aren't willing to keep lending to sectors like thermal power where they keep losing money. China is an absolute world leader and absolutely embracing this transition. July 2019 saw China announce the biggest renewable energy tender in the world by a factor of many, 23 gigawatts of renewable energy. Now, why I highlight this transaction is not just the size, it's the fact that it is the first Chinese tender of size done with zero subsidies. These plants have to be built by the end of next year, so effectively China has reached grid parity for renewable energy, a point that India actually reached 3 years ago. But another factor about China is to bear in mind the Chinese absolutely plan to dominate this sector, to drive this sector. And I talk about this sector as not just wind or solar, but batteries, rare earth, lithium, iron, grid, hydro, electric vehicles. All of these aspects, China is already the world leader and is very, very ambitious and aggressive in that. And I mean, I was just looking at the press yesterday in Australia. A lithium ion company was going bankrupt and the Chinese came and bought it. Why do I say that? Because China is driving the price of these products down dramatically in order to drive market share. I put that out there as a reminder that if you plan in India under Make in India to compete with the Chinese, know they have huge scale, huge ambitions, and they're very, very long dated in their thinking, and they're very aggressive in their pricing. Now, I would rather receive the implied subsidy of solar modules from China than try and compete in India on solar modules, for example. But again, just to reinforce, over a less than 2 decades, coal-fired power in China goes from 80% of generation to their target of 50% by 2030. So China, like India, is absolutely transforming and doing it in a growing market, and coal within that is being diluted very significantly. And when you think about India is one of the 3 or 4 largest installers of renewables already in the world, but India is doing 10 or 15 gigawatts. China consistently is doing 80, 90, 100 gigawatts every year. So India's ambition of 40 gigawatts a year of variable renewable energy is definitely world leading. It can be done. The Chinese are already doing it. They've been doing it for the last 5 years. Variable renewable energy integration right now at the national level is not a major problem for India yet. Just to put some numbers, in the last 12 months or the last fiscal year, variable renewable energy was 21.8% of capacity, but only 9.2% of generation. So less than 10% of generation. The examples I'll quote of Germany, California and South Australia, we're talking about 3, 4, 5 times the level of variable renewable energy integration. So there are lessons to be drawn from those markets, because India is going to be getting there very, very soon, would be my estimate. We've seen thermal power installs across India drop 80% in the last 3 years. We've seen renewable energy already double. But obviously talking at the national level, it's not, it's a state market, state-by-state market. As the last speaker mentioned, Karnataka in July had 3 days of more than 50% variable renewable energy. Karnataka is the top state in India for integration of variable renewables, 30% of total generation last year. So obviously some states are going to hit constraints a lot faster and need to adopt these lessons. And again, just to reinforce the deflationary nature of renewable energy, here's some data from Adani Green Energy. They're highlighting not only is renewable energy 20% lower than the grid cost of wholesale, but they're forecasting it's going to be well below 2 rupees a kilowatt hour within the next 5-6 years. So just to move on to California. California delivered 34% of its energy for the year last year from renewables. Its target is for 100%. Now they use carbon-free by 2045, so they're including the nuclear in there, but 100% by 2045, and they're actually on track for that target. They're ahead of schedule. So again, California, not America, the state of California is one of the leading markets in the world. Now, one of the technologies they're using, which we've seen the CEA here in India talk about, is lithium-ion batteries. Now, in Australia, we were very proud 2.5 years ago, we installed the biggest lithium-ion battery in the world, or Tesla did, 100 megawatts, 129 megawatt hours. California is building 2 batteries that are 2 to 3 times the size of the Tesla South Australia battery as we speak. And stranded assets, was touched on it. It's not the theme of my presentation, but it's worth bearing that in mind. California last month turned off a gas-fired power plant that GE only built 1 decade ago. Right? 1/3 of its useful life, $700 million down the drain in 1 small plant. So that is the nature of the disruption and the need to embrace the technology change. There's no point building gas baseload. As the last speaker just said, variable renewable energy provides the baseload, and we need to plan for that. And GE, as our next speaker, is very much a world leader in wind turbines, but has also got some lessons on the thermal side, unfortunately, for its shareholders. But again, to highlight how fast this market's moving, and it's easy to throw rocks, but here's a forecast over the last decade in America, just looking at coal in America. So the American government, the EIA, forecasts that American coal consumption would double this decade. Fast forward a decade, it's halved. So they've got the order of magnitude right, they've just got the direction wrong. So technology is the core driver there. Pricing and markets are the core driver there. Technology is the driver. Moving to Germany. Germany, again, is very much, has been for the last 20 years, driving globally this technology revolution and disruption. It's amazing to look at the data out of Germany. Year to date, 46.9% of energy has come from renewable energy, 34% of that from variable renewable energy. And I was just seeing this afternoon, thermal power generation in Germany in the last 8 months is down 17% year on year. That is lignite, black coal and gas combined, down 17% this year alone. So anyone that thinks this is going to be a gradual multi-decade transition, think again.
Mr. Buckley, could you conclude in 1 minute?
1 minute, certainly. Australia, I'll just finish on my last example, which is Australia. Australia has been very much embracing renewables. The trend nationally is upwards. It's north of 20% variable renewable energy. But South Australia is one of the world leaders at 49% variable renewable energy for the last 12 months. So half of the electricity for South Australia is coming from variable renewable energy. This will be my last slide. You'll see here that over nationally, Australia is talking about a massive investment in solar, a massive investment in wind. solar, both rooftop and utility scale. But you'll see water, 6.2 gigawatts of pumped hydro storage. So we have about 6 or 8 of the world's largest pumped hydro storage projects underway right now concurrently across 6 locations. And obviously all of that critically relies on batteries and interstate grid transmission, virtual power plants, demand response management. So embrace all of the technologies. To do that, to unlock the financial markets, we need time of day pricing. Thank you.